blast from the past. My garage sale gem. Right, so picture this. Saturday morning, hungover as usual. The sun was barely up and I was already regretting the night before. Stumbled upon a garage sale, you know, one of those spontaneous neighborhood events where people try to offload their old junk. Amongst the junk, a cracked lava lamp and Richard Hammond's missing garden gnome, sat this dusty old radio. It was like a treasure hunt, but with more cobwebs. A Phillips, they called it. The name rang a bell, but I couldn't quite place it. I'm no historian, but I'm pretty sure Phillips made light bulbs back then, not radios, or maybe they did both. Who knows? Anyway, this thing was ancient. It looked like it had seen better days, probably back when disco was still a thing. Beige plastic, enough knobs to land a plane, and a speaker grill that looked like my grandma's knitting. It was a relic, but it had character. The owner, a bloke who looked like he'd lived through the 70's himself, swore it still worked. His eyes twinkled with nostalgia as he spoke. £10, mate, he rasped, lighting a cigarette with a £10 note. It was a scene straight out of a movie. I was skeptical, but 10 quid's 10 quid. I figured, why not take a chance? Into the boot it went. I felt a strange sense of excitement, like I was bringing home a piece of history. Back home, after a bacon sarnie and a strong cuppa, I decided to give the old girl a go. I was curious to see if it had any life left in it. Plugged it in, held my breath. Nothing, not even a flicker. Typical, I thought, just my luck. I was ready to toss it aside. But then, a faint crackle, a pop, and suddenly this tinny voice was singing about peace and love. It was like magic. I tell you, it was like stepping back in time. The sound was scratchy, but it had a warmth to it that modern gadgets just can't replicate. Now, I'm not usually one for sentimentality, but something about that little radio got to me. It was like it had a soul. I decided right then and there I was going to restore this thing to its former glory. It deserved a second chance, just like we all do sometimes. Turns out Philips wasn't just flogging light bulbs in the 70's. They were churning out these transistor radios like nobody's business. Think of them as the iPods of their day. Everyone and their dog had one. They were portable, ran on batteries, and let you tune into the hottest tunes, or whatever passed for hot back then. Now, don't go thinking these were high-fidelity marvels. We're talking AM radio here, folks. Sound quality that would make a deaf badger wince. But there's a certain charm to it, isn't there? A reminder of simpler times, when music was something you listened to, not something you streamed on your phone while simultaneously checking your emails and posting pictures of your lunch online. Before you go poking around inside a vintage radio, a word of caution. Electricity can be dangerous. Don't be a Hammond. Always make sure the radio is unplugged before you start any repairs. Even if it looks harmless, those old capacitors can still hold a charge and give you a nasty shock. If you're unsure about anything, find someone who knows what they're doing. It's always better to ask for help than to risk damaging a valuable piece of history, or worse, hurting yourself. Now, with that out of the way, let's get down to business. Opening up a vintage transistor radio can feel like stepping back in time. It's a fascinating glimpse into the technology of the past. A transistor radio is basically a box of wires, capacitors, and other bits and bobs that would confuse a brain surgeon. But each component has a specific role to play in making the radio work, but don't let that scare you. With a little patience and the right tools, you can learn to identify and understand these components. The main components are actually pretty straightforward. Once you know what you're looking at, it all starts to make sense. You've got your antenna, which picks up the radio waves. It's like the ears of the radio, listening for signals from the air. The tuner, which lets you select different stations. Think of it as the radio's brain deciding which signal to focus on. The amplifier, which makes the sound loud enough to hear. This is the muscle of the radio, boosting the signal so you can enjoy your favorite tunes. And finally, the speaker, which blasts the music into your ears, is the voice of the radio bringing the sound to life. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the technical details, but it's important to appreciate how these parts work together. Just know that these components work together like a well-oiled machine, or at least they did back in their heyday. When everything is functioning properly, it's a beautiful symphony of technology and engineering. The outside of my radio looked like it had survived a mud wrestling match. It was almost unrecognizable under all that grime and dirt. First things first, I needed to give it a good clean. This was going to be a meticulous process, but it was necessary to restore its former glory. A damp cloth and some mild detergent did the trick for the case. I made sure to gently scrub every nook and cranny to remove the layers of dirt. Just be careful not to get any water inside the electronics. Water and electronics are a disastrous combination, so caution is key. You don't want to recreate the Hindenburg disaster in your living room. Trust me, it's better to be safe than sorry. The speaker grill was a different story. It was a real challenge, covered in layers of dust and grime. It was caked in dust and grime, like the back of James May's telly. It looked like it hadn't been cleaned in decades. A soft brush and some compressed air worked wonders. The brush helped dislodge the dirt while the compressed air blew it away. Just be gentle. You don't want to damage the delicate mesh. The mesh is fragile and can easily tear if you're not careful. With the exterior looking spick and span, it was time to tackle the inside. The outside may look good, but the inside is where the magic happens. This is where things get a bit fiddly. Opening up the case reveals a complex array of components that need careful attention. You'll need a can of contact cleaner and some cotton swabs. These tools are essential for cleaning the delicate electronic parts. Carefully clean any dusty or corroded contacts you see. Take your time to ensure every contact is free of debris. This will help ensure good electrical connections. Clean contacts are crucial for the radio to function properly and sound its best.